Today, we're gonna make some Newfoundland baked beans. Now, one thing about this recipe, it's extremely old. In fact, it's centuries old. But this recipe can be found throughout North America. It's a very old recipe, and it was brought over by the settlers, but also they say the Native Americans also used this recipe long before the Europeans settled North America. So it'll be very interesting to see this recipe and to see how simple it is, and the ingredients is actually found locally for centuries. So we're going to bring this recipe to you, but we're also going to do some bread rolls. You always got to have fresh bread rolls right out of the oven whenever you do baked beans. This recipe is done from scratch, and we're going to get right into it. It is tradition here in Newfoundland. Anytime that you have baked beans, you got to have fresh bread rolls. Got to have it. And we're making some fresh bread rolls. We actually bought the dough, so it saved us some time. We're going to put it in the oven, and we're going to have some beautiful bread rolls, hot bread rolls right out of the oven with our beautiful baked beans. Look at these bread rolls. They look delicious. What better side dish to have with your baked beans than fresh bread right out of the oven with some butter? This is going to be absolutely delicious. And this oven works perfectly. The wood heat gives you constant heat. It's not dropping, and everything turns out even tastier than in your electric oven. They look beautiful. Now, those in the cupcake pans, they're a little bit done too much, but we're still getting used to our wood stove, but they're still going to be absolutely delicious. We always add butter to our bread as soon as you take it out of the oven. And instead of doing the dough, making the dough, we bought the dough. So we kind of cheated on this one, but it's still the same. It turns out perfect. Now, the dough that we bought is actually called Towton dough. So what is Towton dough? Well, I'm going to do a future video about Towtons, and I'll show you exactly what Towtons are. Now it's time to sample the bread rolls, and here in Newfoundland, molasses on bread. For the older folks, this is tradition. You always have molasses on fresh bread, and it is delicious. The newer generation don't know anything about molasses, but the older generation, they know everything they need to know when it comes to old-fashioned cooking. And molasses on fresh bread, well, you had to have it as soon as the bread came out of the oven. And it's delicious. We're going to take our white beans and we're going to boil them for about hour and a half to hour and 45 minutes. Now, if you take your white beans right out of the package and place it in your roaster and cook it in the oven, no matter how long you cook it in the oven, you'll never soften the beans. The only way to soften the beans is to boil them. So, hour and a half to hour and 45 minutes would do it. This is Mother. She's taking out the special ingredient. And what is the special ingredient? A lot of people use bacon. But for this recipe, this is a centuries old recipe, and we're going to use salt pork. What is salt pork? Well, like bacon comes from basically the fat off the pig. Now, this is a little more fatty. This is the back fat of pig. So you have the outer skin, and then you have a thick layer of all fat. And it's been cured, so it's been salted. So don't eat a lot of this, because we don't eat a lot of it because they say it will clog your arteries, but this will put a beautiful taste on your baked beans. If you think bacon does a good job, this is even better. Now, the thing about salt pork and this recipe goes back centuries, because beans, as it is in the package, can be stored for a long period of time. It will not spoil. And for the animal fat, the salt pork, it's been cured. So this can last a long time. And in Newfoundland, with the fishing in Newfoundland way back centuries ago, this was their staple in their diet. This was what they ate, and they love baked beans. So we're using a very basic recipe. And we're going to put an onion in there, and again, onion can be stored for a long period of time. And you see the molasses? Well, that's molasses for the sweetness. As you can see, pork fat, back, pork fat. So this is what we use for our baked beans instead of using bacon. Now, if you want to throw bacon in there as well, go right ahead. But this is the old recipe. And some recipes will use maple syrup instead of the molasses. But again, this recipe is very simple, very basic, but you would not believe how delicious this recipe will turn out. Now normally you use brown sugar. Unfortunately we didn't have any today, so we just use white sugar. So that's basically your ingredients. Your salt pork, your onion, your molasses, and some sugar. So we're going to chop up our onion very small into very tiny pieces, and we're going to use about 3/4 to a full onion depending on the size of your onion. And you're not even going to notice this in your baked beans because it's going to be so soft. It's going to add a great flavor to the beans. So we added our beans to the roaster, and now we're just going to throw in all of our ingredients. Throw in your pork, your salt pork, the fatback, the delicious fatback, and then throw in your onions. Now just for added taste, we're going to just add some salt and pepper. You don't really need to add a lot of salt in the beginning because our salt pork, we need to know how much salt is going to be actually added through the salt pork. So just add lots of pepper and just a little bit of salt. And like I said, halfway through we're going to sample it and see do it need extra salt and extra molasses. Now we're going to add some molasses as well. Now you can add, depending on how much you like molasses, you can add half a cup starting out, and as we go through the process of cooking these beautiful beans, we're going to taste it, sample it, and we can always add more molasses. A lot of times we'll actually add 1 cup. Now that everything is added, we're just going to stir everything up really well, and again, throughout the process we're going to give it a good stir and also taste. We're going to also add some water. Now you might need to add a half a cup starting out, and we'll see how that goes throughout the process. If we got to add a little bit more, we certainly will. So we're just adding a little bit more water. As you can see, it's just a little bit. Now Mom knows the consistency of the beans. She knows exactly what it's supposed to look like. So now we have something that we also add to the beans, and I don't know if you can get this where you too, but it's gravy browning. It's just basically a dye to darken our gravies. A lot of people got really light gravies, but we like a darker gravy. Now this gravy browning looks absolutely black, but you only need a little drop to actually turn the color of your gravies, or in this case, just make our baked beans just a little darker. We love to have a little bit of darkness to our beans, same with our gravies. There's really no taste on it, it's just for coloring. Now we're going to transfer it to our wood stove oven, and this oven, this is our heat source. The heat source is firewood. It is no electric, no propane, it's all wood burning stove, and that's how we heat our oven. So we're about halfway through. So at the halfway mark, we're going to take a look at our beans and look at the pork. See that big chunk of pork? That brings a lot of flavor to our beans. And we're going to do a sample taste just to see, do it need any extra salt, any extra molasses? And it's always good to do a little sample taste, especially when I'm doing the sampling. These baked beans are the best you'll ever taste. And I mean, yes, there's lots of recipes out there, lots of great store-bought beans, canned beans, even some bottled beans that you can buy in the grocery store, and they are great. But when you're able to do a recipe like this one, that's very simple, very basic, but all those flavors are very powerful. They come together to make the best baked beans you'll ever eat. To know that this is the same recipe that's been made for centuries, nothing changed, still very basic, but delicious. So when you're eating these baked beans, this is the same taste, same style that people have been eating for centuries. It is absolutely delicious. I know a lot of people, when they're in the backwoods and having a fire, they'll put in some canned beans and add a bunch of different ingredients. Well, canned beans is already cooked and it's already flavored. If you boiled your beans and took your beans with you, and over the fire you just added these ingredients, trust me, it's going to be one of the best baked beans you've ever had. And to have that experience over an open fire, to make a recipe that's been around for centuries, and even take your bread, wrap it around a stick, and just roast it over a fire, trust me, it's going to have a new meaning and a new experience. These baked beans, you can't beat it. Absolutely delicious. Baked beans from Newfoundland, that's centuries old, and I'm going to bring you a lot more recipes that's traditional to our province. And if you enjoyed this video, please check out my cod fry. I think you'll enjoy that one. That one is amazing with cod tongues, britchets, and I'll explain in the video what britchets is. It's a really good video. If you enjoyed this type of content, please let me know in the comments, and we'll see you in our next video.